11 legendary black bands from the 70s who suffered tragic fates. The road can be just as deadly as the spotlight. One bad turn, one broken stage, one flight that never reaches the ground can turn a hit record into a memorial and leave a whole generation asking what could have been. On stage, they looked untouchable. Matching suits, perfect harmonies, blazing horns, and voices that made the 70s feel immortal. But behind the curtain, touring was dangerous. Contracts were fragile, and some tragedies were buried before the public ever understood the cost. Today on Black Hollywood Uncut, we're pulling back the curtain on legendary black bands from the 70s who suffered tragic fates. Stay until the very last second, subscribe to Black Hollywood Uncut, and hit the notification bell, because the final stories still echo like unfinished songs. Otis Redding died aged 26 in 1967. Otis Redding's story is one of the most haunting tragedies in black music history because it happened at the exact moment his future seemed limitless. The transcript places him inside the devastating crash that also shattered the Barcades. And this is one of the strongest, most relevant sections to keep. Unlike many exaggerated parts of the original script, the core event is real. On December 10th, 1967, Otis Redding died in a plane crash near Madison, Wisconsin, at only 26 years old. Before that day, Otis was not just another soul singer. He was becoming the voice of deep emotion itself. His sound was raw, pleading, and almost spiritual, as if every note had been pulled from somewhere too painful to name. Songs like "These Arms of Mine," "Try a Little Tenderness," and "Respect" proved that he could turn vulnerability into power. On stage, he did not hide behind polish. He sweated, begged, shouted, and made audiences feel like love and heartbreak were happening right in front of them. The tragedy became even darker because members of the Barcades were traveling with him. They were young, gifted, and just beginning to taste the kind of success most musicians only dream about. The plane went down into Lake Monona, taking Otis and several members of the band with it. Trumpeter Ben Cauley survived, while bassist James Alexander was not on the plane because he had traveled separately. That detail made the loss even more unbearable. One man lived through the water, another lived because he never boarded, and an entire musical future disappeared in minutes. What makes Otis Redding's death feel almost cinematic is what happened just before it. Only days earlier, he had recorded "Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay," a song quieter and more reflective than much of his earlier work. After his death, it became his first #1 hit, turning into a farewell the world did not know it was hearing. Otis Redding died young, but his voice never aged. His story belongs here because the accident did not only end a life. It froze a moment in soul history, a rising legend, a young band, a cold lake, and a song that still sounds like someone waving goodbye from the other side. Ronald Isley, 85. Age now Ronald Isley's place in this story should be handled carefully, because the transcript tries to build a dramatic accident around the Isley brothers that is not strongly supported by public records. But the emotional idea behind it still fits the theme. Even the most legendary black music groups, the ones that seemed untouchable on stage, were never protected from fear, sudden loss, and the fragile reality of life on the road. As the lead voice of the Isley brothers, Ronald Isley became one of the most recognizable singers in soul and R&B history. His voice could sound smooth, seductive, wounded, and commanding all at once. From "Shout" to "Twist and Shout. From "This Old Heart of Mine" to "That Lady." And later the velvet persona of Mr. Biggs, Ronald helped carry the group across generations. Few black music groups survived as many eras, sounds, and reinventions as the Isley brothers. The transcript presents a frightening 1979 RV rollover involving Ronald and Marvin Isley, suggesting that Ronald wrote a will beside his brother's hospital bed after doctors feared Marvin might never walk again. That is a powerful image, but it should not be repeated as confirmed fact without reliable sourcing. A safer remake can say that the transcript presents the Isley family's touring life as dangerous and unpredictable, while the documented truth shows a group whose longevity was constantly tested by changing music markets, personal strain, health issues, and the pressure of holding a family legacy together. What makes Ronald Isley compelling in this topic is not one unverified crash. It is the larger truth that family groups carry a different kind of burden. When one member suffers, the whole sound suffers. When one brother weakens, the harmony feels it. And when a group's name becomes a dynasty, every private fear becomes tied to the survival of the music itself. Ronald Isley remains alive today, still respected as one of R&B's most enduring voices. His story belongs here because the Isley brothers represent survival in its purest form. Not just surviving trends, but surviving decades of pressure, loss, reinvention, and the dangerous road between one stage and the next. Maurice White died, age 74 in 2016. Maurice White's story belongs to the spiritual heart of black music. The transcript connects Earth, Wind and Fire to a dramatic stage accident involving falling lights and Philip Bailey. But those exact details should be treated carefully, unless supported by strong public sources. For Maurice White, the safer and more powerful story is not about one questionable accident. It is about the fragile body behind one of the most uplifting sounds ever created. Maurice White founded Earth, Wind and Fire with a vision larger than ordinary funk. He did not want a band that simply made people dance. He wanted a universe. Horns, rhythm, African imagery, cosmic philosophy, gospel fire, jazz discipline, and soul emotion all moving together. Under his leadership, Earth, Wind and Fire became one of the most influential black groups of the 1970s, creating records like Shining Star, September, Fantasy, Reasons, and That's the Way of the World. Their music felt like celebration, but also like healing. On stage, the group looked invincible. Lights, choreography, glittering costumes, rising harmonies, and massive arrangements made every performance feel almost supernatural. But behind that brightness, Maurice was a man carrying pressure few people could see. Leading a band that large meant managing not only sound, but image, money, touring, creative direction, and the emotional weight of keeping a musical family together. Later in life, Maurice White faced Parkinson's disease, a condition that gradually limited his ability to perform. That truth fits this theme more strongly than the transcript's unverified accident scene. For an artist whose music was built on movement, rhythm, and radiant energy, stepping away from the stage was its own kind of heartbreak. Yet even when his body changed, the world he built kept moving. Maurice White died in 2016 at age 74, but Earth, Wind and Fire did not fade with him. His vision still lives in every horn blast, every harmony, every dance floor that lights up when September begins. His story reminds viewers that some artists do more than survive accidents or illness. They create a sound so powerful that even silence cannot bury it. Philip Bailey, 75 age. Now Philip Bailey's story belongs to the bright center of Earth, Wind and Fire, where joy, spirituality, discipline, and danger all lived under the same stage lights. The transcript presents a dramatic accident involving a falling light fixture during a 1970s concert, but that specific story should be treated carefully unless supported by strong public sources. A responsible remake should not present the bloodied microphone or permanent injury claims as confirmed fact. Instead, Philip's section should focus on what is undeniable. His voice helped make Earth, Wind and Fire feel almost supernatural. Philip Bailey was not simply a singer in a band. He was one of the defining falsettos in black music history. When his voice rose on songs like Reasons, it seemed to leave the ground completely, floating somewhere between gospel, soul, and pure atmosphere. Earth, Wind, and Fire already had the horns, the rhythm, the costumes, and the cosmic vision of Maurice White. But Bailey gave the group one of its most unforgettable emotional weapons, a voice that could make celebrations sound sacred. In the 1970s, Earth, Wind, and Fire performances were massive, complex, and physically demanding. The group helped redefine what a Black concert could look like, not just musicians on a stage, but a full visual and spiritual experience. With that kind of scale came pressure and risk. Touring, staging, lighting, choreography, and constant movement meant that even the most polished shows carried danger behind the beauty. That is the safer emotional truth behind the transcript's accident framing. What makes Philip Bailey powerful in this topic is not one unverified wound. It is the fact that he stood inside a machine of excellence where the show always had to rise higher, sound bigger, and feel brighter. And through it all, his voice remained a beam of light. Today, Bailey is still alive, still respected, and still connected to one of the most beloved catalogs in American music. His story belongs here because Earth, Wind, and Fire proved that Black music could be cosmic, elegant, joyful, and revolutionary. Even if the transcript's accident details remain uncertain, Philip Bailey's legacy is not. His voice still lifts people out of ordinary life, the way it did when the stage first caught fire. Angie Stone, die age 63 in 2025. Angie Stone's story carries a different kind of heartbreak, because her tragedy did not come during the first rise of the sequence, but decades later, after she had already helped open doors for women in hip-hop and built a respected career in soul music. The transcript places her death inside a dramatic traffic accident after a performance. And while some details may be overstated or need careful verification, the core truth is painful. Angie Stone died in 2025 after a vehicle crash, and the loss shook fans who understood how deep her legacy truly ran. Before she became known as Angie Stone, she was Angie B of The Sequence, one of the earliest all-female rap groups to reach national attention. Their 1979 single Funk You Up became a landmark record, helping prove that women had a place in hip-hop from the beginning, not as decoration, but as voices, performers, and pioneers. That alone makes her important to Black music history. But Angie did not stop there. She transformed herself across eras. From early hip-hop to neo-soul and R&B, she carried a voice that sounded lived in, earthy, and honest. Songs like No More Rain and Wish I Didn't Miss You showed a woman who could sing heartbreak without sounding defeated. Her music had grown woman weight. It spoke to survival, love, disappointment, and the quiet strength of starting over. The transcript frames her death as the final silence of the sequence, with funeral images and exact medical details. Those parts should be softened, unless strongly sourced. The safer version is still devastating. A woman who had been part of hip-hop's foundation died after a sudden crash, reminding viewers how quickly a living legacy can become a memorial. Angie Stone died at 63, but her influence stretches far beyond the accident. She helped carve space for female rappers, soul singers, and artists who refused to fit one category. Her story belongs here because it shows that accidents do not only take bodies, they interrupt unfinished chapters. And in Angie's case, the chapter she left behind still echoes through every woman in hip-hop and R&B who came after her. Ruth Pointer, 80 age now. Ruth Pointer's story belongs to the dazzling but dangerous world of touring, where one ordinary ride can become the moment that changes how a group sees fame forever. The transcript presents a traffic accident involving the Pointer Sisters in 1978, with Ruth injured on the way to a benefit concert. That specific scene should be treated carefully, unless supported by strong public sources. But the emotional truth behind it still fits the theme. Black music groups often lived between applause and danger, moving from city to city with very little protection. Ruth Pointer was more than a member of the Pointer Sisters. She was part of a family force that refused to stay inside one musical box. The group moved through jazz, soul, gospel, funk, pop, disco, and R&B, with a freedom that made them almost impossible to categorize. They could sound elegant one moment, wild the next, and deeply emotional after that. Their harmonies carried the strength of sisterhood, but also the pressure of being Black women in an industry that demanded perfection while rarely offering real safety. The transcript describes a near crash with a fire truck, a missed television opportunity, and a permanent shift in how the group traveled. Those details may be dramatized, but they point toward a real issue. Touring could be brutal. Long drives, tired drivers, rushed schedules, poor logistics, and pressure from promoters placed artists in risky situations night after night. For groups like the Pointer Sisters, every performance required glamour on stage and survival off stage. What makes Ruth's section powerful is not only the possibility of physical danger. It is the larger story of endurance. She and her sisters lived through changes in the industry, personal struggles, health battles within the family, and the emotional cost of keeping a group alive across decades. Ruth Pointer remains a living link to that history. Her voice and presence helped make the Pointer Sisters one of the most exciting and versatile black female groups of their era. Whether the transcript's accident details are fully verified or not, Ruth's story reminds viewers that behind every sparkling performance was a road, and behind every road was a risk the audience never saw.
Paul Williams died age 34 in 1973. Paul Williams' story is one of the most heartbreaking chapters in Motown history, but it should be handled with care. The transcript places him inside a mystery-like tragedy involving the Temptations, a gunshot, unanswered questions, illness, alcoholism, and loneliness. Some of that darkness comes from real public history, but the story should not be pushed too far into conspiracy unless it is clearly framed as speculation. What can be said with respect is that Paul Williams was a founding member of the Temptations, whose life ended far too young after years of private suffering. Before the tragedy, Paul was essential to the group's identity. The Temptations became legendary for their choreography, harmonies, suits, and smooth stage discipline. But Paul brought something deeply human to the sound. His baritone gave warmth and weight to the group. On stage, he was sharp, stylish, and magnetic, helping shape the image that made the Temptations one of the most important vocal groups in black music history. But behind the polished performances, Paul was struggling. Public accounts have long connected his later years to serious health problems, alcoholism, and emotional pain. As the Temptations continued rising, his body and spirit were weakening. That contrast makes his story especially painful. A man who helped build the foundation of a group slowly became less able to stand inside the machine he helped create. On August 17, 1973, Paul Williams was found dead in a car in Detroit from a gunshot wound. His death was ruled a suicide. Though questions and doubts have followed the story for decades, a responsible remake can mention that some people question the circumstances, but it should not claim murder or cover up as fact. Paul died at only 34 years old, leaving behind a silence that Motown never fully filled. His story belongs in this topic not because it was a simple accident, but because it was a devastating loss inside one of black music's greatest groups. The Temptations kept performing, the hits kept playing, and the suits stayed sharp. But somewhere behind the harmony, Paul Williams remained the missing voice, the one whose pain was too heavy for the spotlight to carry.
William Powell died, age 35 in 1977. William Powell's story belongs to the quieter side of black music tragedy, the kind that does not always explode in one dramatic accident, but slowly drains a man while the world keeps dancing to the songs he helped make immortal. The transcript ties him to a mysterious car accident involving the OJs, but that specific story should be treated carefully unless supported by reliable sources. The stronger, publicly grounded truth is that William Powell was a vital voice in one of soul music's greatest groups, and cancer took him far too young. As a member of the OJs, Powell helped shape the sound of 1970s Philadelphia soul. The group's music was smooth, urgent, and deeply connected to black life. Songs like Backstabbers,
Love Train, For the Love of Money, and Used to Be My Girl were not just radio hits. They carried the feeling of an era: suspicion, hope, social awareness, romance, and survival wrapped in flawless harmony. Powell was part of that magic. Alongside Eddie Levert and Walter Williams, he helped build a vocal blend that felt powerful without losing elegance. But behind the sharp suits and polished choreography, his health began to fail. Public accounts show that Powell was diagnosed with cancer, and by the mid-1970s, the disease had forced him to step away from the group's demanding performance schedule. That is where the real heartbreak lives. For a singer, leaving the stage is not just a career change. It can feel like losing a piece of the body. The applause continues. The records keep spinning. The group moves forward. But the sick member is left behind, listening to the sound of a life he can no longer fully join. William Powell died in 1977 at only 35 years old. His story belongs in this countdown because the OJ's rise was not untouched by pain. Their music carried joy and movement, but behind it was a missing voice, a young man erased too soon by illness. The group survived, but every great harmony has shadows, and William Powell remains one of the shadows Motown and Philly soul fans should never forget. Johnny Wilder Jr. died age 56 in 2006. Johnny Wilder Jr.'s story is one of the most devastating and inspiring chapters in 1970s soul and funk history. Unlike many exaggerated parts of the transcript, the heart of this tragedy is real. Wilder, the smooth lead voice of Heatwave, was severely injured in a 1979 car accident that left him paralyzed from the neck down. For a man whose gift lived in breath, movement, and stage presence, the crash could have ended everything. But Johnny refused to let silence win. Before the accident, Heatwave was rising fast. Their music brought together funk, soul, disco, and romance, with a polished international sound. Boogie Nights filled dance floors with heat and motion, while Always and Forever became one of the most beloved black wedding songs of its era. Johnny's voice was central to that emotional power. He could sound tender without becoming weak, smooth without losing soul, and romantic without sounding ordinary. Then came the crash. In 1979, while Heatwave was still riding high, Johnny's life changed in a single violent moment. Public accounts describe a serious automobile accident that left him quadriplegic. The transcript adds dramatic details about the location, the vehicle, and how he wrote music afterward, so those specifics should be softened unless verified. But the emotional truth is undeniable. A lead singer at the height of his career suddenly found himself unable to move the body that had carried him through every stage. What makes Johnny Wilder Jr. unforgettable is what he did after. He continued making music. Even with his physical limitations, he remained connected to Heatwave's sound and later recorded gospel music. That survival gave his story a spiritual weight. He was no longer the same performer the world first saw, but he was still an artist, still a voice, still a man reaching for melody through pain. Johnny Wilder Jr. died in 2006 at age 56. His accident changed Heatwave forever, but it did not erase him. Every time Always and Forever plays, his voice returns, tender, wounded, and eternal, like proof that even a broken body cannot always break the song. Jerome Smith died age 47 in 2000. Jerome Smith's story is one of the strangest and saddest turns in disco history, because his death did not happen under stage lights or in front of screaming fans. It happened far away from the glitter of the 1970s, in a place that made the ending feel even colder. The transcript presents him as the silent heartbeat of KC and the Sunshine Band, and that emotional framing fits. Jerome was not the loudest name in the group, but his guitar helped drive the sound that made millions of people move. KC and the Sunshine Band became one of the defining forces of disco and funk. Songs like Get Down Tonight, That's the Way I Like It, and Shake Your Booty were built for celebration. Their music sounded like nightlife, freedom, sweat, rhythm, and release. Behind the horns, bass lines, and party chants, Jerome Smith's guitar added the clean, sharp pulse that helped the records jump out of the speakers. But the story behind many successful bands is rarely as bright as the music. The transcript connects Jerome's later life to disappointment, financial strain, and a feeling that some musicians who helped build an era were not fully protected by the industry that profited from them. Some of those details should be handled carefully unless strongly sourced, especially claims about royalty disputes or ignored letters. But the larger truth is familiar in Black music history. Session players, touring musicians, and band members often helped create timeless hits while receiving far less recognition than the front-facing stars. Jerome Smith died in 2000 at age 47 after a bulldozer accident in West Palm Beach, Florida. The contrast is almost unbearable. A guitarist whose sound once lived inside disco's golden age died not in a sold-out arena, but in an industrial accident, far from the glamour his music helped create. His story belongs in this countdown because it shows how cruelly fame can fade around the people who made it possible. KC and the Sunshine Band kept their place in music history. But Jerome's ending reminds viewers that behind every dance floor anthem, there may be a musician whose name deserves to be spoken louder. The groove survived. The man behind part of it was gone too soon.
Bobby Smith, die, age 76. In 2013, Bobby Smith's story should be told with care because the transcript presents a dramatic stage fall that is not strongly supported by widely available public records. Still, his place in this topic can work if the focus stays on the real weight of performance, touring, aging, and survival inside one of soul music's greatest vocal groups. Bobby Smith was not just a member of the Spinners. He was one of the voices that helped turn them into a smooth, unforgettable force in 1970s R&B. The Spinners had a sound that felt elegant, but never cold. Their records moved with polish, emotion, and warmth. Songs like I'll Be Around, Could It Be I'm Falling in Love, One of a Kind Love Affair, and Then Came You helped define the Philadelphia soul era. Bobby Smith's voice was central to that identity. He could carry a lead with sweetness, control, and quiet ache, making heartbreak sound graceful instead of desperate. The transcript describes Bobby falling into a stage pit during a performance, suffering serious injuries, and never fully recovering his old power. Because those exact details need stronger sourcing, a safer remake should not present the fall as confirmed fact. But the emotional truth behind it remains useful. Black vocal groups of that era lived under constant pressure to perform perfectly, no matter how dangerous the stage, how exhausting the road, or how little protection surrounded them. For groups like the Spinners, the audience saw matching suits, synchronized movement, and effortless harmony. They did not always see the long drives, unstable stages, rushed rehearsals, business stress, or the physical toll of repeating the same polished magic night after night. Bobby's story can represent that hidden cost, the way a singer's body becomes part of the job, and any injury, illness, or decline threatens not just a career, but an entire sound. Bobby Smith died in 2013, at age 76, after a life deeply tied to soul music. His ending was not the explosive tragedy the transcript tries to create, but his legacy is still powerful. Every time the Spinners' harmonies rise, Bobby is there, smooth, steady, and unforgettable, reminding us that some voices do not disappear. They simply keep spinning through time.
Behind every golden harmony, there was a road the audience never saw. These legendary Black bands carried the sound of a generation, but fear, industry pressure, unsafe travel, illness, and silence often turned their brightest years into private nightmares. Some losses were reported, others faded behind contracts, curtains, and grief. But tragedy could never erase what they built. Their voices, grooves, falsettos, bass lines, and stage fire helped shape soul, funk, disco, R&B, and Black music history. Even when accidents cut careers short or pain followed them home, Their genius stayed alive inside every record that still moves us today. Which group's story hit you the hardest? And which song from this era still gives you chills? Drop your thoughts below, like this video, subscribe to Black Hollywood Uncut, and hit the notification bell for more unvarnished stories.